You didn't just stumble into that relationship. And no, it wasn't bad luck or weakness or some cruel twist of fate. You were placed there. I know those words might sting. You might be thinking, why me? Why did I have to go through that kind of heartbreak? The confusion, the walking on eggshells, the way you slowly started doubting everything you thought you knew about yourself. But what if I told you that none of it was random? That behind the pain, behind the betrayal, there was something deeper, something meant to awaken you. You see, we spend so much time asking what's wrong with them, why they lied, why they blamed us. But this story isn't about them. It's about you, about the version of you that kept shrinking just to keep the peace. The one who silenced their gut just to hold on to something that never truly held them. The one who tried to earn love like it was a reward. But something inside of you, it always knew, even in your quietest moments, a whisper kept rising. This isn't love. This isn't me. So today I want to tell you a different story. Not a story about pain, but a story about awakening. Because the truth will not only shock you, it will set you free. Let's get one thing clear. You were not randomly dropped into the middle of a narcissist's life, like some emotional contestant on a reality show. Nope. You were placed there on purpose. And I don't mean by some cruel universe that delights in throwing curveballs at the nicest people. I mean placed like a seed, buried in the dirt, not to be punished, but to grow. Now I know how wild that sounds, because at first, it just feels like pain. The kind that makes you question your sanity, your worth, your whole identity. But here's what no one told you. That experience wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to break you open. See, most of us before the narcissist came along, we were already lost. Not dramatically, not in some obvious movie-style way, but quietly. You forgot who you were. You dimmed your light. You made yourself smaller, bit by bit, to keep things peaceful, to keep people around, to keep love. You told yourself things like, well, maybe I am too sensitive, or I just need to be more understanding, or the classic, if I can just love them better, they'll change. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's not love. That's conditioning. The truth is, many of us were trained, yes, trained, to ignore ourselves. Maybe by a parent who only gave affection when we performed. Maybe by a society that said, nice girls don't speak up. Maybe by years of people-pleasing, because it felt safer than being rejected. And right when you've become a master at abandoning yourself, boom, that's when the narcissist walks in, like a perfectly timed villain in the rom-com that suddenly turns horror. Not because you were weak, but because you were open, giving, generous, and let's be real, slightly allergic to conflict. They saw that. They saw the part of you that didn't yet know your worth, and they used it not always consciously, but effectively. Here's where it gets wild. They didn't choose you by mistake. They chose you because something inside you was ready to wake up, not to romanticize the pain, but to say the pain had a purpose. You weren't meant to stay in that mess. You were meant to see it clearly, feel it deeply, and then rise. Because sometimes we don't realize how far we've drifted from ourselves until someone shows up and shatters the illusion. That's what the narcissist was, not a soulmate, but a mirror. A mirror reflecting back all the parts of you still craving healing. The part that believed love had to be earned. The part that thought being chosen meant being valuable. The part that tolerated crumbs because you thought a full meal was too much to ask for. And here's the plot twist no one expects. That relationship, that chaos. It wasn't the end of your story. It was the moment your story finally began. So no, you weren't placed in their life to be broken. You were placed there to remember who you are. And once you do, once you really see it, you won't just walk away. You'll walk home to yourself. Now let's talk about what that disconnection from self really looks like. Because most of us don't even realize we've lost ourselves until we're halfway through Googling, why do I feel crazy in this relationship? Let's go there next. Let's talk about something sneaky, not the narcissist. Don't worry, we'll get back to that chaos factory in a bit. I'm talking about the subtle, quiet, almost invisible ways you started losing yourself long before they ever showed up. Because here's the truth most people miss. You don't fall into toxic love when you're fully connected to your truth. You fall into it when you've been slowly, silently abandoning yourself and you didn't even notice. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like one day you wake up and go, you know what? I'd love to ignore all my needs and date someone who emotionally confuses me. Nah, it's a slow drift. You stop trusting your gut because it's been dismissed so many times, even by yourself. You feel something is off, but then you override it with logic, like, well, maybe I'm just overreacting. Again, you constantly seek reassurance. You text them just to make sure everything's okay. You reread their last message 5 times, wondering what tone they used when they said sure. You apologize a lot for speaking up, for having emotions, for existing on days they're in a mood. You say yes to things you don't want to do just to keep the peace. You laugh at jokes that make you uncomfortable. You go along with plans that drain you. And if someone asked how you really feel, your brain hits a loading screen like, I haven't checked in with myself in 3 months. You might look like you've got it together, career friends curated Instagram feed, but inside there's a quiet ache, like something is missing, and that something is you. Let me give you a real-life example. Take Jenna, smart, successful, empathetic. She could lead a team of 20 people at work, but couldn't decide what restaurant to eat at when she was with her partner. She'd say, whatever you want, even when she really wanted sushi. Why? Because she didn't want to seem difficult. That's the kind of subtle disconnection I'm talking about. It's when your peace depends on someone else being okay. It's when your identity starts melting into theirs, because somewhere deep down, you believe that if you're easy to love, maybe, just maybe you won't be left. But here's the twist. That disconnection didn't start with the narcissist. They just exploited it. And that's why it's so important to name these signs. Because if you don't know what disconnection looks like, you'll keep calling it loyalty. You'll call it love. You'll call it, I'm just being a good partner. But really, you're slowly disappearing. So let's pause right here. Take a breath. Ask yourself, when was the last time you honored your feelings without editing them? When was the last time you said no without guilt? When was the last time you felt like you were enough without needing someone to agree? If those questions make you uncomfortable, that's okay. Discomfort is not shame. It's a flashlight. Because here's the deal, you can't rebuild yourself if you don't first realize where the cracks are. And now that you've started seeing those cracks, we can finally talk about the one who walked in and made them impossible to ignore. Let's dive into how narcissists find these wounds and why they're so good at making them feel like love. Okay, now that we've named the cracks, let's talk about who walked right through them. Uninvited, but somehow charming enough to stay. The narcissist. Here's the truth. Narcissists don't pick just anyone. They're not roaming the streets like emotional pirates yelling, I choose you for my manipulation adventure." No, they're more strategic than that. They're not looking for weak people. They're looking for giving people, open hearts, empaths, givers, people who've been trained through childhood trauma or a lifetime of people-pleasing to prioritize others over themselves. In other words, they're looking for you, and not because there's something wrong with you, but because there's so much right about you that you haven't fully owned yet. Let's break this down with a bit of psychology. There's something called the empath-narcissist magnet. Think of it like emotional Velcro. One side is craving love and validation because they never learned to give it to themselves. The other side, craving admiration and control because they never developed a stable sense of self. Boom! Instant trauma bond. It's not healthy, but oh, does it feel familiar, especially if your nervous system was wired for chaos, disguised as connection. Imagine you're a lamp that shines kindness, intuition, and resilience. To the average person, you're a beautiful light. To a narcissist, you're a power source. They plug into you because they know you'll shine brighter for them than you do for yourself. And at first, it's flattering. They mirror your dreams. They say all the right things. It feels like someone finally sees you. But what's really happening is they're studying you, not to understand you, but to use you. Let me give you a real example. There's Mark, kind, loyal, never wanted to be a burden to anyone. His narcissistic partner, she made him feel like her hero, her safe space. But the moment Mark tried setting a boundary, like saying, "I need some space tonight," boom, guilt trip, silent treatment, accusations. Mark didn't walk away. He tried harder, because he thought if he just loved better, communicated better, gave more, he could fix it. Classic trap. See, the narcissist doesn't pick a fight because they love drama. They pick someone who will doubt themselves before ever doubting the relationship. And the more you question your worth, the more power they have. Now here's the thing that most people miss. This isn't just about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you understand that you were chosen, not because you're broken, but because you're deeply whole, you just forgot it for a while, you take your power back. And when you start healing, you become the person who sees the red flags the first time, not the 17th. You recognize love that feels calm, not chaotic. You stop being chosen and start choosing. And that, my friend, changes everything. So now that we've explored the why they chose you, how they pulled you in, let's go deeper. What exactly were they feeding off of? What wound did they tap into? And how can you finally heal it? Let's talk about that next. All right, so if narcissists are mirrors, then what exactly were they reflecting? Here's the truth most of us aren't ready to hear. At first, they didn't create your wound. They just found it, poked at it, built a condo in it, and threw a housewarming party. That pain, maybe it came from a parent who only hugged you when you succeeded. Maybe it came from always being the peacemaker in your family. Maybe you were the strong one, the fixer, the "you're so mature for your age" kid, who never got to just be. Whatever it was, it left a message inside you. One that whispered, "If I want to be loved, I have to earn it. If I'm not needed, I'm not worthy. If I take up too much space, I'll be abandoned." And that's the wound the narcissist saw. Like a heat-seeking missile, they zeroed in on the part of you that still questioned your own value. And at first, it felt like healing because they said all the things that old pain had been dying to hear. "You're everything I've ever wanted. I've never felt this way before. You're the only one who really gets me." It was intoxicating, but it wasn't nourishment, it was bait. They gave just enough attention to keep you hooked, just enough hope to keep you trying. And when you started doubting yourself, guess what? That served them too. Because people with unhealed wounds make excellent performers. They overgive. They apologize for everything. They twist themselves into emotional yoga poses to prove they're not too much. It's not love, it's survival. Here's a real-world example. Jason grew up with a mom who withheld affection when he cried, so he learned early emotions. Rejection. Fast forward 20 years, and he's dating someone who praises him when he's calm, but shuts down whenever he expresses frustration. So guess what he does? Swallows every need, bottles every emotion, until one day he realizes, "I'm invisible in my own relationship." That's what these wounds do. They make you shrink in places you were meant to rise. And the worst part, most of us think the pain means we're broken, that we failed, that if we just tried harder, loved better, communicated differently, it wouldn't have fallen apart. But the truth is, the relationship didn't fall apart because you were too much. It fell apart because you were never meant to live in a cage. So here's the shift. Your wound is not your identity. It's your invitation. An invitation to finally see yourself clearly, to finally stop outsourcing your worth, to finally stop handing over your voice for the hope of being chosen. And if any part of this feels like it's tugging on your soul, pause. Let yourself feel that. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of return. If this message resonates with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. Comment below what part hit home for you, because someone else might read it and realize they're not alone. And if you're on this journey of healing and self-worth, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. This space is for you, and you deserve to keep going. Now that we've looked at the wound, let's talk about the transformation. Because once that pain is exposed, That's where the healing really begins. Let's be honest, when you're fresh out of a relationship with a narcissist, the last thing you want to hear is, "They were your teacher. Excuse me, they gaslit me, confused me, drained me, and now I'm supposed to send them a thank you card." No thank you. But here's the thing, when the dust settles, when you've cried, the tears blocked the number, and maybe rage screamed into a pillow, you start to see it. They weren't the love of your life. They were the pattern interrupter. See, most of us carry unspoken rules we don't even realize we're living by. Don't be too much. Keep the peace at all costs. Be easy to love or else. And you can live with those silent contracts for years, decades even, until someone walks in and pushes every single emotional alarm in your system. Not gently, not politely, but like a bull in a healing crystal shop. That's what the narcissist was. Not your soulmate, not your forever, but your wake-up call. They made the dysfunction so loud, you couldn't ignore it anymore. They made the chaos so unbearable, you finally had to choose between their approval and your peace. And guess what? That moment, when you chose you, that was the real beginning. Now, this doesn't mean what they did was okay. Abuse, manipulation, control, that's never justified. But it does mean the relationship had a purpose bigger than pain. You weren't meant to stay in that cycle. You were meant to see it, name it, break it. Think of it like a fire alarm. It's annoying, it's loud, it's disruptive, but it also saves your life. That's what their role was, not to destroy you, but to shake you awake from the version of you that was still living in survival mode. You don't have to be grateful for the pain, but you can be proud of who you became because of it. So maybe they weren't a curse. Maybe they were a catalyst, the force that finally made you look in the mirror and say enough. I'm done abandoning myself. And now that you've said that, it's time to talk about what comes next. Because breaking the cycle doesn't end with leaving the relationship. It begins with learning how to set boundaries that protect your healing. Let's go there next. So, you've walked away, or maybe you're just now finding the strength to say, this isn't love, it's emotional gymnastics. Either way, the big question becomes, now what? Because healing isn't just about cutting them off. It's about learning how to protect the version of you that's finally starting to come alive again. And that, my friend, begins with one of the scariest but most powerful words in the English language: boundaries. Yep, boundaries. Not brick walls, not ultimatums, but clear, kind, and firm decisions about what you will and will not accept. Think of boundaries like emotional immune systems. They don't keep the world out. They teach you what belongs in your space and what doesn't. But here's the twist. If you grew up in dysfunction, boundaries can feel like rejection. You're so used to earning love through sacrifice that saying no feels like betrayal. And narcissists, they smell that discomfort like sharks smell blood. Which is why every time you tried to set a limit, they pushed. They guilted you. They made you question your right to even have needs. So let's reframe this. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're sacred. They're how you say, I love myself too much to allow this behavior again. Let's use a real-life example. Maria used to say yes to every last-minute favor her ex threw her way: rides, money, emotional support, after he caused the drama. One day, she finally said, I can't keep dropping everything for you. And guess what? He called her cold, accused her of changing. But Maria, she didn't back down. She took a walk, turned off her phone, and reminded herself, peace is not something I have to earn. That's the kind of quiet rebellion that rewrites your life. Now let's get practical for a second. If you're wondering where to start, here's a quick list. If someone raises their voice at you, you walk away from the conversation. If someone makes you feel guilty for needing space, you take it anyway. If someone ignores your no, you stop explaining yourself and start enforcing it. And here's the big shift. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about protecting your energy so you can show up as your whole self. No edits, no shrinking, no performing. It might feel awkward at first. It might make people uncomfortable. And some relationships, they won't survive the boundary. But the ones that do, those are the ones where real love grows. Because the people who truly love you will respect your limits, not punish you for having them. So now that you've got this new armor, let's talk about what it looks like to rebuild from here. Not just to survive the breakup, but to become someone even your past self wouldn't recognize in the best way. Let's step into that version of you next. So here you are. You've walked away. You've started setting boundaries. You've begun to choose yourself, maybe for the first time in a very long time. Now comes the part nobody warned you about. Who am I without them? Because when you've spent so long being what someone else needed, calm, agreeable, available 24/7, you might not even remember what you want, what you like, what your voice sounds like when it's not filtered through fear. That's the awkward, messy, beautiful part of healing. Rebuilding your identity. And no, it's not glamorous. It's not like you wake up one morning post-breakup with glowing skin, perfect clarity, and a new sense of self. Nope, you wake up feeling raw, lonely, and maybe a little ridiculous because you just cried over someone using your favorite mug. But that discomfort, it's sacred. It's the signal that you're no longer numb. You're coming back to life. So how do you rebuild when your old self was so wrapped up in survival? Step 1, get curious. What feels good? Not what looks impressive. Not what makes others comfortable. What makes you feel grounded, alive, safe? Maybe it's spending time alone without guilt. Maybe it's saying yes to that art class you always dismissed as too indulgent. Maybe it's unfollowing every social media account that makes you question your worth. And while you're at it, ask yourself some hard questions too. Did I shrink in that relationship just to be loved? Where did I learn that being chosen meant being worthy? Am I living the life I want or the one someone else expected of me? Let me tell you about Chris. After ending a toxic engagement, he realized he hadn't made a personal decision in years without second-guessing it. He didn't know what music he liked anymore. He hadn't cooked his favorite meal in forever. So he started Small Me Mondays. One evening a week, he did something just for him: solo hikes, sketching, learning guitar. And over time, that one evening turned into a lifestyle. That's how identity works. You don't find it all at once. You build it one aligned choice at a time. And yes, sometimes that means grieving the version of you who tolerated what now feels intolerable. But grieving her or him doesn't mean failure. It means evolution. Because here's the truth. You're not starting from scratch. You're returning to the you that existed before. The world told you who to be. The you that didn't perform for love. The you that doesn't mistake chaos for chemistry. And as that version of you grows stronger, you stop being magnetized by people who require you to abandon yourself. You start attracting relationships that feel like safety, not survival. So take your time. Rebuilding is not a race. It's a reclamation. And once you begin reclaiming yourself, you're going to see something amazing happen. The mistakes that once felt like proof you were broken now become proof that you've grown. And that brings us to something most people don't talk about: the common traps that show up after you leave the narcissist. Because healing isn't just about moving on. It's also about not accidentally walking back into the same pattern, wearing a different face. Let's get into that next. So you've done the brave thing. You left. You're rebuilding. You're rediscovering your favorite coffee order without having to defend it in a debate. But just because you've walked away doesn't mean the healing is on autopilot. Let's talk about something super real: the mistakes almost every survivor makes after leaving a narcissist. And let me say this up front: this isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Because if you can name it, you can change it. Mistake 1: jumping into a new relationship too soon. Oh, this one's tempting. There's a voice that says, if someone new loves me, then maybe I wasn't the problem. But that voice, that's not healing. That's the unhealed part of you looking for proof you're still lovable. Truth is, if you haven't rebuilt your sense of worth on your own, you're just handing it to someone else again, gift wrapped with a bow that says, please don't break me this time. Mistake 2: thinking healing means never getting triggered. Listen, triggers are like emotional bruises. Just because something still hurts doesn't mean you haven't healed. It just means you're human. The goal isn't to be immune to pain. The goal is to recognize it, pause, and respond differently. Mistake 3. Seeking closure from the narcissist. Whew, this one's tough. We want the final conversation, the apology, the confession that yes, they were the problem all along. Spoiler alert, you're not gonna get it, because closure doesn't come from someone who never took responsibility in the first place. It comes when you decide the chapter ends without their permission. Mistake 4. Romanticizing the good times. Yep, the highlight reel shows up at 2 a.m. with a sad playlist and nostalgia goggles. Suddenly you forget the gaslighting, and all you remember is how they looked at you that one night under the stars. But don't let a few fireworks make you forget the wildfire. The pain was real. The confusion was real. Don't minimize it just because loneliness is loud. Mistake 5. Believing you're supposed to be fully healed before you're allowed to feel joy again. Nope, that's not how it works. Healing and joy can coexist. You're allowed to laugh, date dance, cry, rest, fall apart, and get back up, sometimes all in the same day. You don't have to wait to be fixed. You just have to keep showing up for yourself. Here's the lesson. In all of this, healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral. Sometimes you'll revisit old wounds, but each time you'll meet them with new wisdom. So don't beat yourself up for these missteps. Catch them, learn from them, and gently keep going. Because now that you know what to avoid, we can shift focus to something even more empowering, the tools you can actually use to keep growing, keep grounding, and keep rising. Let's get practical next. Okay, so you've left the relationship. You've set boundaries. You've caught yourself mid-rebound text and said, "Nope, not today, Satan." Now you're standing in the most powerful and sometimes awkward place of all the in-between. That quiet stretch between who you used to be and who you're becoming. And this is where the real magic happens, if you have the right tools. Let's talk about what actually supports long-term healing. Not just the feel-good for a minute kind. I'm talking about the stuff that rewires you from the inside out. Tool 1, journaling, but not the Dear Diary, he sucks kind. We're talking intentional prompts, questions like, what did I believe I had to do to be loved in that relationship? What boundary did I break with myself to keep someone else comfortable? What am I afraid will happen if I fully choose me? These questions cut through the noise. They get to the root. And sometimes they'll make you cry over your avocado toast. But that's healing, baby. Tool 2, daily affirmations. But hear me out, ones that actually feel true. You don't have to chant, "I am radiant and powerful," if you feel like a bag of emotional Legos. Start simple, honest, like, "It's okay to take up space. I can be loved without performing. I am learning to trust myself one choice at a time." Say it in the mirror, write it on a sticky note, make it your phone wallpaper. Repetition rewires. Tool 3, nervous system regulation. Yep, we're getting sciencey for a sec. Because here's the deal, if your body thinks chaos is normal, peace will feel boring or even dangerous. So learn how to calm your system on purpose. That can look like deep breathing box. Breathing inhale, 4, hold 4, exhale, 4, hold 4, gentle movement walks, stretching dancing badly to 90s throwbacks, grounding exercises. Name 5 things you can see, 4, you can touch, 3, you can hear. This stuff matters. Healing isn't just mental, it's physical too. Tool 4, connection, but the safe kind. You don't have to do this alone. Talk to a therapist, join a support group. Even following creators or communities that speak life into your journey can help. Because when you hear someone else say, "Me too," your shame shrinks and your courage grows. Tool 5, celebration. Seriously, celebrate the small wins. Didn't text your ex when you were sad at midnight. Win. Said no and didn't apologize for it. Win. Stayed in instead of going to that event you didn't want to go to. That's self-trust, baby. Healing doesn't only look like crying on the floor. Sometimes it looks like joy laughter or resting without guilt. Let those count too. Here's the truth. There's no one-size-fits-all recovery roadmap. But there is a U-shaped path, and these tools help you walk it one choice, one breath, one brave little moment at a time. And when you commit to that kind of healing, you don't just change your own life, you change the entire legacy of what love looks like for everyone who comes after you. Let's talk about that next. Because your growth, it doesn't end with you, it echoes. Let's zoom out for a second. Everything we've talked about, leaving the narcissist, reclaiming your voice, setting boundaries, choosing healing. Yeah, it's personal, deeply personal, but it's also bigger than you. Because when you start healing, you're not just rewriting your story, you're rewriting a legacy. Maybe you grew up watching someone accept less than they deserved, a parent who walked on eggshells, an aunt who gave everything and got almost nothing back, generations of women or men who were told to stay quiet, keep it together, not rock the boat. And without even realizing it, you inherited their survival strategies, the people-pleasing, the silence, the belief that love requires pain, or that your needs are negotiable. But here's the wild part, you don't have to pass that down. You get to interrupt it. When you say, "This ends with me," you're not just saving yourself, you're creating a new blueprint, a future daughter who watches her mom walk away from disrespect and say, "No, that's not love." A little brother who sees his sister set boundaries and learns that emotions aren't weakness. A future partner who meets you and realizes, whoa, love can actually feel safe. That's the legacy. You become the chain breaker, the one who said, "I'll feel the pain so no one after me has to carry it blind." And yeah, it's messy. There are tears, lonely nights, days where you question if you're even making progress. But then something shifts. You stop apologizing for needing more. You stop shrinking just to keep someone else comfortable. You start loving in a way that doesn't cost you your peace. And that kind of love, that's revolutionary. So if you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, still breathing through the discomfort, I want you to know you're already doing it. You're becoming the person who doesn't just survive. You transform, you lead, you liberate. And this story, it's just getting started. If this video held space for you, if it reminded you of your worth, helped you feel seen, or sparked something in your healing journey, share it with someone who needs the same reminder. Drop a comment with one belief you're choosing to leave behind. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because from here on out, we grow forward, together. If this video made you feel seen, if something in it whispered, "That's me," then don't let that moment pass you by. Take a breath, let it land, and if it spoke to your heart, really spoke, then share it with someone who might still be in the thick of it, with someone who needs to know they're not crazy, not broken, just waking up. Drop a comment below and tell me, what are you no longer willing to shrink? For your story might be the very thing someone else needs to begin theirs. And if you want to keep healing, growing, and rising with a community that gets it, hit subscribe. Not because you have to, but because you deserve spaces that reflect your worth, not question it. Save this video. Rewatch it when the old wounds whisper. Because every time you choose yourself again, you're building a life that honors the real you. And that's a revolution in the making. We're just getting started.